Why was this British World War II commander hated by the Americans but loved by the British soldier? During the Allied invasion of German-occupied Europe, Field Marshal Montgomery was detested by the American generals, unjustly maligned and unfairly criticised. Montgomery was one of Britain's greatest military commanders. His military success, abundance of self-confidence, and straightforward but abrasive manner turned many of his peers against him. It is probable that Montgomery's frankness was due to undiagnosed autism. Montgomery was the Allies' most experienced and successful commander who had fought and beaten Rommel in the North African desert. In Normandy, Montgomery would take on the full might of Rommel's panzers again and win. The British soldier loved Montgomery. After 4.5 years of war, Britain was running out of fighting men, and Montgomery would not squander their lives unnecessarily. He looked out for the lives of his men and would not go into battle until he was properly prepared and knew he would win, no matter what pressure was placed on him from above. Preceding D-Day and up until the breakout of Falaise, Montgomery was in complete command of all land forces, British, Canadian and American. Some US senior army officers, particularly General Patton, resented having to serve under a limey commander. There is an inexcusable misconception that during the Battle of Normandy, the British were sitting on their backsides drinking cups of tea while the Americans were doing all the fighting. This was even perpetuated in the American movie Saving Private Ryan, when it is said, "The British are sitting in front of Caen drinking cups of tea." Nothing could be further from the truth. The British were fighting, and fighting hard. At Cheux, a few miles west of Caen, the fighting was so fierce that the Glasgow Highlanders lost a quarter of their strength in a single day. Caen, a D-Day objective, wasn't taken on D-Day. A battle-hardened, experienced German army also stopped most other objectives being achieved. The objective to take Caen on day one, set a year previously, was based on there being 20 to 50 German divisions in France. There were 60 German divisions in France. An assault on strongly fortified enemy beaches and a 10-mile advance inland was simply not an achievable objective on day one. By day two, the Germans had brought up 2 more panzer divisions and continued to reinforce the Caen sector throughout June. The British and Canadian advance was slow because Rommel committed the necessary men and armour to stop them, and this was exactly what Montgomery had planned. Allied strategy was to draw the bulk of the German army divisions to the British, allowing the Americans to break out to the west. In his memoirs, Montgomery writes, "The master plan was to draw the main enemy strength onto the front of the 2nd British Army, while the Americans make the ultimate breakout." US Commander Omar Bradley confirms this in his memoirs. The British and Canadian armies were to draw the enemy reserve to their front at Caen, while we, the US Army, were to make our breakout on the long roundabout road to Paris. The British operation was a sacrificial one, to sit in place and pin down the Germans while we tramped around the outside flank. For it was towards Caen the enemy reserves would race once the alarm was sounded. Montgomery writes, "My objective was to establish a strong armoured force to the southeast of Caen, ensuring we kept the bulk of the German armour on the eastern flank, thus helping the Americans expand on the west. There was never at any time any intention of making a breakout from the British bridgehead on the eastern flank." Misunderstandings about this were responsible for much of the trouble between British and American army commanders, with the Americans incorrectly thinking they were bearing an unfair share of the fight and casualties. Facing the British and Canadians were 6.5 German panzer divisions, facing the Americans 1.5. On the 60-mile western front, the British were fighting 10 German divisions, which included 6 panzer divisions. The Germans committed their last reserves, the greatest concentration of panzers since the Battle of Kursk, in an attempt to contain the British offensive. The density of German armour on the British front was 2.5 times that of on the Russian front. The Russian superiority in strength on the Eastern Front was 300%. The Allied superiority on the Western Front was only 25%. The Allies were clearly not in a position to launch an all-out offensive along the whole front. Nevertheless, Eisenhower would berate Montgomery for his slow progress. The Battle for Normandy was an Allied victory in which many countries all played an essential part.